Okay.
All right, Graham, great to see you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Daniel. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you for the work. Well, Lauren's not seen it yet. My wife and I watched Dare to Dream the other night, and of course, for those listening or watching, Graham Rittener is the director, producer, all of the above
Producer, yeah, producer.
of
Uh,
the film Dare to Dream.
yeah, different guy, Joe Delahanty, did the directing, but yeah, I produced it. I'm not actually a producer by background. We can get into that, but I did produce my first film. This was it.
All right, Lauren, question.
Which one?
Your first one.
Yeah, so you kind of already answered it. I was gonna say like, why did you become a producer? But
Well, I guess I didn't answer the question why. So yeah, good question. I've always loved documentaries for for many years. A great documentary. It's just one of those things that um, yeah, I've always really enjoyed. So in the back of my mind, I had this idea, maybe one day I could get involved, make a documentary, even though I don't have that kind of background. And and then, when I went down into the Bitcoin rabbit hole and all of that, it started becoming clearer that if I was going to make one, it was probably going to be to do with Bitcoin. And then I went to El Salvador when the news came out about the new law, and I went on a sort of exploratory trip to El Salvador, and I discovered this story, and I was like, wow, this is it. This is probably, if I'm going to make a documentary, this has got all the hallmarks of a great film. So that was what, in the end, triggered me to do it. And yeah, so that's how it all came about. I don't know whether I will go on. I think maybe I will to do more, but that was how the first one happened.
wow, that was so. Wait, you're the one. Wait, did you come up with the idea, or you just?
Yeah, I came up with the idea for the film. I mean, as it turns out, the main guys who are the kind of protagonists of the film, the Bitcoin Beach guys, had already been thinking, because by that stage their story was starting to come out, and it was obviously a pretty fascinating story that then led on to this history being made with El Salvador. And so they themselves, I think, had started thinking about that maybe there's a documentary in their story. They'd been approached by some other people, but they were mainly bigger kind of networks from the US that wanted to sort of profit from their story. There was very much a kind of selfish motives. And for us, for me, there was no incentive, to make money out of it. I just wanted to, get the film out, get the story out there. And so, yeah, we connected and got on great, and found, I guess the chemistry and the right vision for the film. And yeah, so it was a little bit, they had an idea, but essentially it was my idea, I guess, my kind of vision of what this could be.
Now, I've got to ask a question at this moment, because my wife and I have been talking about the film that we watched, and I've been saying to the kids, right, when you get some time, you got to sit down and watch this film called Dare to Dream. And they keep shouting back at me, it's not a film, it's a documentary. And I'm like, okay, there's no difference to me, right? But clearly there is to the kids. Is there a difference in the industry or to you, or what's the correct terminology here?
Well, it's both, right? So documentary is a genre of films or movies, yeah, I think if you said to someone, what's your favorite film, they would probably think about a film with actors and, you know, and acting and so on. So in that sense, you could say, yeah, it's film is more, you know, used in that context, but a documentary is, well, a feature documentary, especially because you can get short, you know, 10-minute documentaries, or I wouldn't really call a film, but I guess you could still say it's a short film. But yeah, it's a type of film that I can see the other side of it as well.
Yeah. What is it in your mind, Lauren?
So basically, a documentary for me is when there's no actors. Well, most of the time, maybe in some little clips, but you know, because it's documentaries and then little clips and how they explain it. But it's kind of like when a movie wants to do something historical, they'll get actors and they'll act it out. But the people who want to do a documentary, they'll get the people that were there and talk about it, like an interview.
All right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's pretty much it. But nonetheless, your father is right as well. It is still a film.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you. Okay, say goodbye to Graham.
All right.
On that note,
thank you. Bye.
take that memory
Lauren,
upstairs with you.
bye. Nice to meet
Go
you.
tell your brothers and sisters. Actually, Daddy was half right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, probably not going to bother them. Do you have kids, Graham?
I don't actually. I don't.
Right.
I-
Well, there you go. There was a good advert for why not to have kids. So, okay, we've got to do this. We've got to do a bit of exploration here and investigation into your journey, because this is what the plebs and the listeners and the viewers love to kind of connect with. As people like yourself, you weren't a movie producer. You had nothing to do with that industry, I'm guessing. You jump on a flight to El Salvador and you come back and you're producing movies. Like, this is what Bitcoin does, right? This is nuts.
Exactly.
So let's back it up, please, mate. You've clearly grown up in and around the UK, I'm guessing, from your accent.
Well, so I'm English. You're correct about that. But actually, I was born in London, but I didn't actually get brought up in the UK. So my father was a chemical engineer in the oil industry, and so the first part of my life actually was I lived in, well, we as a family lived in many different places, strange sort of parts of the world. So I had quite an interesting sort of upbringing, I guess. I was born in London, but then my first months of my life were in some weird little town in Oklahoma, and then not that I remember any of that, but I've seen some old cine film and stuff from back in those days. And then we moved to Bahrain in the Middle East, and spent first couple of years, I guess, in my life there. Very different country to the Bahrain that we have now. It's back in the 70s. And then we moved to Iran. Lived a couple of years in Iran, and then we left at about the time of, we were there when the Shah was there, and then we left about the time of the revolution, and it started getting dangerous, and so we got out, and we moved back to Europe. We went and lived in Italy, spent a couple of years living in Italy, and then moved to Spain. And so I think we moved to Spain when I was about 8 years old. And my parents actually, they've lived in Spain ever since. So yeah, I was as you say, I'm from the UK, but not brought up in the UK. Eventually went back and studied in the UK, and lived in London for a number of years. But yeah, that was the start of my life.
Okay, so you finish your studies and then off into the grand old world and finding a career, 9 to 5, corporate ladder, that kind of stuff.
More or less, yeah. So I guess just to go back a step, I was not one of those people who chose, I went to university, but I didn't study, medicine or law or, accountancy or whatever. I didn't have a very clear focus of what I wanted to do. Actually, at that point in my life, all I really wanted to do was travel. I was intensely curious about the world and wanting to just, I guess in some ways, maybe my upbringing had already started to shape, my outlook. And I just wanted to see the world. So I ended up studying Spanish and Latin American studies because I knew that my third year would be, I could go to South America and spend part of the year there. So yeah, I came out of university with a useless degree, had no idea what I was going to do. But I was, and I was, scrimping and saving and managing to keep traveling. Really, I was still really, my focus for quite a while was traveling. I guess that spirit of adventure, right? And but eventually, yeah, I had to think about getting a job, proper job. And so I started working in London. I managed to find a job at a very kind of low level in the world of kind of marketing, and ended up working in London for quite a few years, probably nearly 10 years, really in that world of kind of marketing agencies, branding, digital communications, that kind of stuff. And so yeah, not exactly corporate ladder, but I was in that world, and eventually then moved to Barcelona in Spain. I guess I moved more from the kind of marketing communication side. I moved more into product development and innovation, and ended up running my own consultancy in Barcelona for about 6 or 7 years, doing product design, development, innovation, consulting. And and then during that whole spell, I was I was also very much by that stage into the whole Bitcoin world. I had gone down the rabbit hole, and
how? Why? What happened? That was in London, was it? When you're doing the marketing?
Well, the beginnings, the kind of pretext, I guess, was in London. So I moved from, I originally moved to Malaga before Barcelona, and that happened in 2009. But sort of before that, so in London, I guess the rabbit hole story began without Bitcoin having arrived yet. And that was, so yeah, I mean, it was interesting. It was the time when I got my first like proper job in London with a reasonable salary. Was around 2003, 2003, I think it was. And at that stage, everybody around me were just buying flats. It was very much in the kind of the middle of the property bubble, I guess. And everyone was buying flats. I'd never been very inclined towards getting loans, getting a mortgage. I had this sort of aversion to this idea of getting into debt, but I guess I got sucked into it. There were people, people around me buying, and I was like, okay, well, maybe it makes sense. Maybe it's a good, idea, good investment. So I kind of, put together a budget based on what I thought I could get as a mortgage, on my salary, and the deposit I had and stuff. And I think the budget I had at the time was about 250K, right? And so, as I say, around 2003, 2004, and I thought that's a pretty good budget. That should get me, something half decent. And I went out and I started looking at flats, and and looking at what I could get for my budget. And I was just blown away by how small these little places were. And then it just got me, and I realized it just got me thinking, how is it possible? All these people around me, a lot of them in their 20s, they're all buying flats, they're all getting into debt, they're all, none of them are, well, most of them aren't particularly, you know, they're not the sharpest tools in the box, let's say. And yet they're all getting, you know, and that's what started it. I was like, this doesn't make sense. How can this world? And I guess I'd never really thought about this debt-based financial system that we lived in. And so that was the beginning. I was like, I got to understand this more. And I started going, and then it went from the kind of the debt-based system into the monetary system. And and so I ended up going down the rabbit hole of understanding our monetary system, central banking, all of that stuff. And I was, you know, without, you know, being any great sage or anything, I you know, I was one of the people who did know the financial crisis was coming. Actually, you know, one of the people who's a bit of a laughing stock of the Bitcoin world now is Peter Schiff. But back in those days, before Bitcoin ever turned up, he spoke a lot of sense, and he still does about other things other than Bitcoin. And so, you know, people like him were sort of banging the drum, saying, "Look, this is insane. What's happening? We're massively, you know, the debt bubble is going to burst. The crisis is going to come." And so I was already very much down that, you know, in that direction. And then so that led me to being a gold bug. I got into precious metals. I was you know, buying gold and silver as fast as I could. And so by the time 2009, 2010 came along, and I started hearing about Bitcoin, which was when I'd moved to Spain, I was already primed for it in some ways. You know, I was aware of the background. I think, you know, Seyfedin's book, you know, has been such an orange pill book for so many people, right? And it's because he does such a great job of explaining the background behind Bitcoin, what it's actually solving. And so luckily I'd already, you know, been, you know, gone down that. And so I was ready for it. And then when I first started hearing about it, 2010, that began my Bitcoin rabbit hole. And I was pretty optimistic very quickly. You know, I kind of didn't take me long to think, yeah, this could be something big. But at the same time, I should just add, I had no confidence in it at that point. You know, I wasn't like, right, this is it. This is going to change the world. It was just like, it made sense to me, the idea of it, and so I thought it was worth a punt. And but I still thought, you know, there's so many hurdles ahead. This is going to be it was kind of like, let's just see what happens. It's worth, you know, getting involved, and we'll see where we go. And here we are now.
It's interesting that you talked about that moment back in 03, I think you said, when you were looking around at these flats and looking around at the people that are buying them. I think we're around probably the same age, Gen X, I'm assuming. Yeah. You know, I'm mid 40s. And I remember as well, I mean, I remember as well, mid to late 40s, I should say. I remember, I mean, I was living in Singapore at the time, and the housing market there was just going one way exponentially. It was just crazy. But there were other market forces at play. And I remember talking to friends back home and in London, and what was going on there as well. I was like, like you, I couldn't make any sense of it at all. Like I could not understand how the family houses we had all grown up in, which I knew our parents had bought for like 25 to 30,000 pounds, were now the same house was £500,000. Like, the same house. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And I don't care how many times you say location, location, location in a row, like, it still doesn't make any fucking sense at all. Yeah, and I don't care how much you say, oh, well, the infrastructure's improved. There was the traffic jam every single day, you know, getting in and out of town, and potholes in the roads. So none of it made sense to me. And like you, I saw my friends all going into debt. And it's funny, I was just thinking about this the other day, because what's happening now in the UK, I've seen some tweets and some anecdotal stories have come my way as well about how people are currently going through a remortgage because of their 3 to 5 year loan period is rolling over, and they've got to now renegotiate with their bank or their mortgage lender new rates. And rates now aren't 0.5%. Rates now are 4.5% or 5%. This is nuts. Like the difference that makes to somebody's monthly payment is huge when you're already in debt and living hand to mouth and running on the hamster wheel. You could be a 2-parent family, both at work, and you're about to get shaken out of your house, or you've got to renegotiate something which is going to keep you at work another 5 to 10 years in the future. And I can't, like, how many more people will wake up because there's something coming and it's going to be pretty bad. And when you look at what they did in COVID, I think it was back end of 2020, early 2021, when they lifted stamp duty. Do you remember that in the UK?
Yeah, exactly.
Which fueled, all of a sudden, everybody's putting their houses on the market because they could get cheap cash, right? 0.5%, and they could flog their house, and then they could upgrade in their minds to a bigger house, more comfortable living, lock themselves into another 5-year mortgage, which is now all going to come to bear in the next 18 months or so. And it's already started happening for some people. So there's trouble coming. And there's something else you said as well, aversion to debt. And I've always had that too. And I don't know why. But then when you look at the games that are being played, let's take a billionaire, for example. If that billionaire wants a new house or a new luxury item or toy, what's he going to do? Is he going to go out and buy it and cut the check? No, he's going to go to the bank and say, I want that house. It's 6 bedrooms. It's in the perfect location for me and my family for when we want to spend our summer months here. What terms are you going to give me? They go straight to debt.
Yeah.
So when they get that debt, when they get that counterfeit money that the bank is legally allowed to print and counterfeit into their system for them to buy the house that they want at better terms than anybody else on the street because they have a better credit rating, that person, that billionaire, has just debased the currency of everybody else around them. And this is perpetual inflation. And this is sick. That's why you have an aversion to debt. Because every time you take out a loan or apply for a loan, you are impoverishing, you're debasing the worth and the value of everybody else around you.
Exactly. Well, I think it's that, and the other aspect of the aversion to debt, I think, is also, I guess there's part of me which has a sort of, freedom-loving libertarian side to me. And so the debt is a liability. You're accountable to somebody else or to another institution or whatever it is. But yeah, it's exactly that. And it's interesting because you nailed it. Many of the wealthiest, most successful people have played the system, right? And that's actually, it's a little harder now because interest rates have gone up, but the last 20 years really is been cheap money, and actually probably the best way to to play the system, if that's what you want to do, if you want to accumulate wealth, was probably to actually take advantage of that debt-based system, take advantage of cheap money, borrow. That's what many people did. They, especially in the real estate market, right? They did exactly what you said. They buy up property cheap with very cheap rates, and the market's just is just going up, and they sell at a higher, and then they reinvest that money. And so but exactly what you mentioned is and it's something that gets lost on many people, not so much in the Bitcoin world because people are aware of this now, but every time a loan is created, every time a mortgage is created, it's new money. It's it's not the bank isn't giving you a portion of their reserves to go and buy that house. They're just creating another 500,000, 1 million, 10 million, whatever it is, in fresh new money into the money supply. So
it got me thinking about what Zuckerberg did. Classic. He wanted more privacy, right, around his house. So we got a dude here. He's a billionaire, right? We all know that. So he buys 4 houses around him. He buys his neighbors' houses. He buys them out to ensure his privacy. That was $30 million back in whenever this happened. I guarantee you, he didn't just cut the check for $30 million, right? He maybe put down 10%.
Yeah.
Still, you're borrowing 20. Well, no, the bank who's going into that deal is counterfeiting $27 million of new money into the system. And you've just impoverished, which drives prices of property up for everybody else and impoverishes, well, debases the currency of everybody else as well. It is, I mean, it's not even a zero-sum game. It's worse. It's, this is an interesting point that we, as Bitcoiners, are probably going to have to think about long and hard, because when you're in that position, and I know there's companies already out there, are you going to loan against your Bitcoin? So you're going to keep your Bitcoin nice and safe, and then you're going to enter into the debt market and take out pounds, euros, dollars against your Bitcoin and be part of, like, perpetuate this sick charade. So you're fine with your Bitcoin, but now you're going to enter that market and take the counterfeit money and debase the value of everybody else's currency.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
doesn't sound cool, does it?
Doesn't sound cool at all, no. And yeah, I think that's the danger, right? And I mean, we've already seen, I guess we've seen a bit of that already, right? And some of them have now failed, the BlockFis of this world. But yeah, I mean, I'm ashamed to say I actually went down that path for a brief period with BlockFi, and well, it happened to be a time where I needed fiat and really didn't want to be selling my my stash, so I ended up collateralizing, taking some fiat from BlockFi, and but luckily I got out before they collapsed, and yeah, and then I said to myself, right, I'm not going down that path again. It's not cool in any way. So yeah, I think it's that's the interesting thing. How's it actually going to play out, right? Is Bitcoin just going to become a sort of reserve asset, a bit like gold was, and on top of that we're still going to have the fiat, the fiat world, but it will be somewhat tied, constrained, or to a kind of Bitcoin standard, let's say? Or does Bitcoin itself become the global currency of choice? So maybe it's one first and then evolves to the other. Who knows how it's going to all unfold?
And every country is going to be different, right? Which is a nice point of the conversation to take us to El Salvador. So
right.
You jump on a plane and you want to go down. You've seen the announcement, I suppose, and you're like, what is this? Like, had you heard of Bitcoin Beach before Bukele came and announced in Miami 21?
No, I hadn't. The whole announcement at Miami, I wasn't there. I was in Barcelona, actually, and yeah, that was just a bolt out of the blue, right? It was an amazing bolt out of the blue, because it was, they were pretty depressing times, right? At that point, we were right in the middle still of the whole COVID fiasco, and the way that had, the response to that, right, that we saw from governments, media, from even a lot of the general public, and yeah, so it was, those were quite tough times, you know, to be going through. I was also going through some health issues, not serious, you know, nothing, you know, really serious, but I had a really bad shoulder issue at the time, and I was going through intense kind of physio in Barcelona, and so it was, you know, just trying one's best to keep your head above water and, you know, stay positive, and we're going to get through this. And then, you know, the Miami thing came along, and it was, you know, against this sort of Orwellian backdrop that was, you know, had taken over the world at that point, was this sort of, you know, this bolt out of the blue of kind of freedom and hope, you know, tied to El Salvador. So yeah, I straight away, I was like, wow, what's this all about? You know, where did this come from? You know, I didn't know anything. I hadn't been followed, because I think there had been some coverage. I think maybe Peter McCormack had already done a podcast down there or something, but I hadn't seen it. So yeah, it was completely new to me, and but I straight away, I was like, right, you know, went down the El Salvador rabbit hole and found out about Bitcoin Beach, and it just seemed like this, you know, incredible story. It all started in this little village on the coast, you know. So, you know, that just played into my spirit of adventure anyway. You know, I love going off on a trip, and so yeah, that was I couldn't travel immediately because of my shoulder problem, but I made the decision pretty much that day. I was going to go and check it out, and so I think it was about 2 months later, I went down, and went straight to El Zonte, and yeah, that's kind of where it all began. I arrived in El Zonte without knowing, you know, anything or anyone. I went on my own, and it was just that the whole thing was quite bizarre, you know. When I arrived, I had some, you know, ideas of what I thought El Zonte was going to be. I thought I was already going to be a bit late on the scene in terms of the Bitcoin. You know, I thought it was going to be just full of Bitcoiners everywhere. And have you been have you been yet? No. So I arrived, and it was like the you know, well, the specific place where I went into El Zonte, because there are like 2 or 3 different roads that take you into the village, and the first one that I went down, there was just like nobody. There was nothing. It was just like a few huts, you know, and I was like, am I in the right place, you know? Anyway, some girl appeared, and she ended up escorting me to where she was like, oh yeah, you know, she wasn't anything to do with Bitcoin, but I sort of explained why I was there, and she's like, oh, I know where there are some people hanging out. And so she kind of escorted me to this little hotel, one of the kind of more, I guess, modern hotels that are there. It's just a small like boutique hotel, I guess. And and there was like there's probably about six people sitting around a table, and the only person I recognized was John Vallis. And so I went straight up to him and I said, hey John, you know, big fan of your podcast, and so ended up sitting with those guys, got chatting, and so at that point there was no, you know, I didn't, as I, you know, I never went with any objective to, right, I'm going to go there and, you know, pitch them a documentary. In the back of my mind, I thought, oh, that's an interesting story, you know, but I hadn't gone there with any kind of real objective. And anyway, got on great with John, and then eventually got to meet the Bitcoin Beach guys, and kind of the conversations started. And
I love the fact that you were led into like just I imagine the scene, just a tiny little shack on the beach somewhere, and there's 6 or 7 plebs sitting around, and one of them's Vallis. So you're like, yes, how good is that?
Exactly. Well, it was such a relief to see a familiar face, and like, okay, these guys, I know that for a fact then that these are Bitcoiners, and so, and he, it just so happens he was, one of my kind of favorite podcasters out there, and so it was awesome to meet him, and yeah, and then I got to meet the other guys, as I say. It was all a bit strange because when they were, as I found out, there were other people starting to turn up there, and at the so that they have this place called Hope House, which is kind of their headquarters. It's not the right word, but you know what I mean. It's kind of where they're based, I guess, and yeah, and so I could see that they were chatting with different people and whatever, and busy, and I didn't really want to, like, I guess partly that British, sort of reserved kind of thing. I didn't want to just go steaming in there and go, right, guys, it's me, and I want to make a documentary, and like, so I was just sort of hanging around sort of the edges, and eventually Chimbera, Roman, kind of just one day just sort of looked over at me and just said, hey, who are you? what are you doing here? And so I eventually kind of properly introduced myself, what I was doing there, and I said, I didn't really come here with any particular plan. I came here to see what was going on, meet you guys, understand the story. I said, if now that I have understood the story a bit more, because I think about this time actually John had just released his first podcast with them, and they really went into the background of their background and leading up to the whole Bitcoin Beach, before Bitcoin was part of their story, and that was fascinating. And so I was starting to think, well, then maybe this is a documentary idea. And so I just started floating the idea past him, and he was like, wow, actually, funnily you should say that. We've been sort of thinking about something as well. We've been approached by other people, but they didn't make sense to us. They had their own their own agenda, the commercial agenda. We didn't really want to be part of that. And I said, look, I've got no commercial agenda. For me, this is something that I think it's just an amazing story, and I think I could get behind it, And so it started off as a sort of back of a napkin kind of very basic agreement, and it was them actually who said, well, if we're going to do this, we'd love John to be involved, because he's really his line of questioning, it really makes sense to us. We love where he's going with this, and I was like, perfect, that's I would love to have John involved as well. And so it was sort of one thing led to another, and they took John out for dinner without me knowing, and kind of pitched him the idea, and he was like, yeah, I've never done any documentaries before, but if I can help in any way, I'm happy to help. And then he kind of left El Zonte thinking it's probably never going to hear anything again. And then I got in touch with him a couple of weeks later, I think, and said, hey, look, I've pretty much come to some agreement with the boys in Bitcoin Beach, and if you're up for it, we'd love to make this happen. And so that's how it all started.
Not a quick process, right? This is how many years work have you put in since, like, making the film and then editing the film, producing the film, to the point of actually dropping it?
Yeah, so it's been over. So that excuse me, that first trip was, I think, July, August 2021. So, and it's just come out now in the last couple of weeks. So about a month ago, I should say. So over 2 years from beginning to end journey. It was about 3 months of planning from the time we, started from the time we came to an agreement. About 3 months of planning. We went back in November 21 to film. We were there for about a month filming every day, pretty much all day, and then we did another couple of weeks in the US, and so yeah, it was probably in total 6 to 8 weeks of filming, and because we then went back again to the US to do another interview we had to do, and then it was about 8 9 months of editing. So a lot. I mean, we had so much footage; it was crazy, and there was so that's the the tragic side in a way is how much doesn't make into the film. Even and I know probably the only little bit of negative feedback we've had from a few people is that it's a bit on the long side. Generally, the feedback's been amazing, which is great, but it is quite long, and that was still having to leave so much out of it. So yeah, it's so the editing process was really long, and yeah, so that took us to about August, September, I think, of 2022, last year, and then after that, starting to think about the kind of I say commercial, the kind of path to market, let's say the distribution side, and that was a big decision-making process that we had to go through as well. How do we do this? Do we just put it out on YouTube and or do we go down a more kind of traditional distribution route if we can, because it's not easy to get that.
Yeah, well, what does that look like? Do you have to start pitching big corporations, companies in Hollywood, wherever, that might be interested in taking up the film and distributing it? We're all novices here, right? Even you guys, I suppose. And that's another point, because you guys did this. You were a complete novice before you started, just had the idea. Vallis had never been in a film before, but it's all so brilliant. I mean, he does a great job. You do a great job. Chimbera and all that, it just comes across as so well polished. You'd never know that this was just a bunch of Bitcoin plebs throwing some shit at the wall to see what was sticking. it looked like a very highly professional piece of work.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, well, it was one of those. It felt like one of those things where just everything fell into place. It was, and it was kind of meant to be. Just and as a group when we filmed as well. There was in the end there was quite a crew of us, the sound engineer. We had a couple of local guys in El Salvador who were helping us out. And a really important part of this that made it all polished and everything was Joe, the director, and he's not a pleb or not a Bitcoiner pleb. We actually managed to convert him over the filming process, or at least got into to dip his toes in the water. But no, he was brilliant. He'd done only one feature documentary before. He'd done a few short films, but I had some experience working with him in Barcelona on a small project, and I was like, wow, this guy's good. He's really and I sort of underappreciated as far as I could see, and so I thought, I think he could do a fantastic job. So he really, he put the polish on it, and we all kind of did our bit, and luckily it all came out great. But yeah, it was the whole distribution side. I mean, I should just explain that as well, because I do, you know, it is something I'm very conscious of, is that we, you know, we're asking people to pay for it, you know. Well, it wasn't by going down the distribution route. It's actually the distributor who's got that strategy. But by going down that route, it means that people are having to pay for content. And I know that that's, you know, not very common these days. People are so used to, you know, really having free video content. And so, yeah, it's worth explaining how that came about and why that came about. And so when we set out to make when we first, you know, decided to make it, and I got Joe on board as the director, we had to think about, okay, who's this film for? You know, what are we trying to do here? What's the real purpose? Who's it for? What audience are we trying to reach? And we all agreed that this was a story that could be very relevant to the general public, to the masses, not just, you know, the Bitcoiners. And from my perspective, I thought there was a real opportunity and a gap, let's say, in content that was out there, to do with the kind of human stories around Bitcoin. You know, there was so much content around, you know, the technical side, obviously, around the kind of macroeconomic side, the history of money, you know, more the kind of philosophical side of how, you know, what could Bitcoin mean, you know, in the future. And but there wasn't that much that really kind of showed how, well, two things. One, the people that are involved in Bitcoin, who are trying to bring Bitcoin to the world, and actually how Bitcoin is affecting people, how it's changing people's lives, transforming lives, you know. And because one of the things I think on the first, you know, the people that are bringing Bitcoin to the world is that, you know, it's very clear, especially back then. I think it's becoming maybe a little less so now, but Bitcoin had a really bad image, you know, in the general public. You know, it's like it's you know, destroying the environment. It's, you know, a bunch of cultists, toxic maximalists, you know, speculators just trying to, you know, prop up a Ponzi scheme, you know, all these complete, you know, and actually when you meet people in Bitcoin, they're generally like just really nice people, you know, and people who actually want to make a difference, people who want the world to be a better place, you know, they're kind of idealists. And I don't think any of that was really out there, you know, and it was very. So here was an opportunity to you know, look at these people in El Zonte, look at the compassion and sense of, you know, empathy and love and whatever that these guys have, and so yeah, so there was this opportunity to showcase that, and also to see how Bitcoin was affecting, you know, the people there in El Salvador, and how it's changing people's lives and so on. And so, you know, in terms of the vision for what this film could be, who it could connect with and so on, it was like, well, this could be a film for the general public. And so then when it came to the distribution side, we didn't decide anything until the film was made. And once the film was made, it was like, wow, this is, you know, this is really high quality. The cinematography is amazing. The production's really good. It's been really well, you know, kind of weaved together. And so it was at that point we thought, well, you know, I guess it was ultimately my decision, like what am I going to do? And I thought it was worth maybe going, you know, because on the one hand, if you put it on YouTube, it's free and accessible to everyone. So, you know, what's going to get more eyeballs in the end, and what kind of people? And so it was a difficult decision, but I thought if we go down the distribution route, if it ends up getting on, you know, something like Netflix or whatever, then, you know, it's just going to get in front of many more people, different types of people. And that was really the main criteria, I guess, the main decision-making point in the end to go down that route. And so,
did you get any help or connections or backing at all from the El Salvador government or the tourist board or Bukele himself?
not Bukele himself, and we got some help. Well, we interviewed the Minister of Tourism, Morena Valdez, and she's amazing. She's just such a great character, super friendly, and very supportive of the whole Bitcoin Beach thing. And so she was, we interviewed her, and she through her office and so on, we got some help in doing a screening. The first ever screening was in San Salvador, the capital, and it was for the we brought up all the people from El Zonte, all the Bitcoin Beach guys, and we had some government people there. It was quite an interesting mix of people. So that was amazing that, they helped us get a venue where we could film it, and we didn't have to pay for it. And so that was fantastic. But no, in terms of the distribution, they weren't involved in that. As you say, I'm completely novice, didn't know, what I was doing, but I ended up doing I went down the rabbit hole of filmmaking and film distribution, and it's a quagmire, trying to navigate, even for people who, really know what they're doing. So I ended up finding an expert, someone who's worked in that industry all his life, and that's what he does. He helps independent filmmakers find distributors, and so I contracted him as a sort of middleman, and his name's Glenn Reynolds. Runs a company called Circus Road Films, and so he ended up pitching it out for me on my behalf, and ended up managing to get this deal. I mean, I didn't realize what a big deal it was, actually, because he himself said he gets approached by many independent filmmakers, and he said he only, out of people who approach him cold, he probably only takes like 1 in 10. So that as a starting point, was great that he even though I'm paying him, he still, because part of it as well is he gets a commission on the success. So and then he pitched it out and found this deal, and so that's how it came about. And
what is the deal? Are you able to share?
I can't share the exact numbers, but effectively they're I can say who it is. There's they're called Freestyle Digital Media. It's one of the biggest independent distributors in the US, and therefore probably the world, to be honest. And they take a commission on, so they don't take any money up front. They don't pay me any money up front, I should say. And they take a commission on everything, on every film that on all the revenue that comes in. And they have exclusive rights to the US, Canada, and the Caribbean. And then outside of that, they have kind of non-exclusive rights, which means that I'm able to take it, sell it, or distribute it however I please outside of those territories. So yeah.
All right. So where are we at the moment? What's and how can the people listening or watching, how can the plebs watch it? How can they help? How can they add value? What's the next step?
Right. Well, the next step is go and watch it. It's been out a few weeks. It's out on many different platforms. So yeah, I mean, just to explain that, so the distribution strategy is, the first period, we don't know how long that period is. It's because they have what they call a windowing strategy, and so the first window is a transactional window. So they put it out on many different platforms, and you buy it or rent it initially. There's a chance that later on it'll end up on it could be a Netflix or a Hulu or a HBO or whatever. But this for the immediate future, it's it's available to rent or buy. In the US, it's on like it's all over the place, really. It's on every cable network that there is. It's on a lot of the satellite networks, like Dish is like a big one over there. It's on, the big streaming platforms like YouTube Movies, Google Play, Amazon. So, the easiest thing.
Are you on My Movies Plus?
I don't believe I'm on My Movies Plus.
I'll connect you with Corey, because Corey's a pleb. He's a Bitcoiner, and he owns that platform.
Yeah.
And he wants to get all the Bitcoin films on there.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yep.
That would
So
be.
I'll put you in touch after this.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, so now it's a case of watching it, and I'm obviously trying to get as many people to see it, give as much feedback as possible, if you enjoy it, obviously spread the word. I think that for me the whole film it raises a bigger, it gets into the whole area of adoption, right? Which I think is a really interesting subject, and that's something that I guess is a motive as well. Was how could I play my role in trying to drive? I believe what Bitcoin can do, right? It's not just about, for me, it's not just hodl and I'll have a lot of purchasing power in the future. For me, it really can, I really believe it can change the world. And so that, in that sense, then is, well, how do we get the world to adopt it? And so for me, doing the film was a lot about that. This is my small contribution. This is something I can do to help hopefully help adoption, which is why we wanted to get it into the kind of the more mainstream audience, rather than just the Bitcoin community. Well, I don't really like using the word community. I think it's more the Bitcoin plebs, let's say. And but I think adoption is a really it's a really interesting area to think about. Like where are we with adoption, and what's going to drive it, and what's coming next, what's the next big kind of step forward. So that to me is I see the film as part of that, part that kind of fascinating area to explore.
Yeah, well, mate, thank you for your work and stepping up. It's very inspirational, and I hope a lot of people watching this or listening they will eventually go and scratch their own itch, because they know that they've got something in them to add value to this space. And I say it all the time. It doesn't matter if it's a song or an article or a poem or a film. In your case, there's something, and we need all hands on deck to just capture that next 1,000 people. It's that's the way this is going to happen. So I guess final question wise, I usually ask, if you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why? But I guess in your case, if you could choose one person to sit down and watch the full film and suddenly click, I get Bitcoin, who would that person be and why?
Well, before you said the part about now I get Bitcoin, I was going to probably say Bukele because I love to watch the film, and then because I think it's a really very obviously it's a very pro El Salvador film. So I think hopefully it will do something towards their contributing to their reputation building as well, which is already incredible, right? It's amazing what's happening in terms of the way that they've changed their image and reinventing. You know, I hear Stacey Herbert always talks about, you know, the greatest rebrand that's ever happened, and I know what she means. It's so yeah, so I would love Bukele to watch it, but obviously he really does get Bitcoin, so in terms of orange pilling, that wouldn't make sense. I guess, you know, I guess it would have to, you know, be another filmmaker because it's, you know, and so I don't know. I think, you know, there's a couple of people whose documentaries I've really enjoyed in the past. I don't know if you know the British documentary maker Adam Curtis. Do you know of
Doesn't
him?
ring a bell. What documentaries has he made?
He's well, he's done many over many years. I think probably one of his biggest well-known ones was a few years ago now, called Hypernormalization.
Huh.
Is that
No.
ringing bells?
No. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, this already sounds like the perfect idea. I can see where your mind is going.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he's done some amazing documentaries over the years. I mean, the only thing is, I think, you know, they've all been released through. I think they've all been released through the BBC, and so he's, you know, a little bit, I think, constrained by how far he can go with his documentaries by the fact of this, you know, that it's going out on the BBC. So, but you know, he did one, for example, back in the days of the whole war on terror, called The Power of Nightmares, which was really interesting, big one. It was all about the propaganda being used to kind of drive the war on terror and all of that. But he's just got a really amazing way of making films, and he uses just all these great kind of snippets of footage that I guess because he has access to the BBC archives, he's able to weave together these incredible kind of stories. Anyway, I highly recommend him as you know, check out some of his documentaries. Hypernormalization is a really good one.
Yeah, I'm just reading out a quick paragraph about him. Adam Curtis is a British documentary filmmaker. His favorite theme is power and how it works in society. I mean, come on, Adam. Like, this is it. This is the thing. We have the perfect, absolute perfect, you know, case here.
Exactly. So if you know, I'd love him to be orange pilled and to do one of his style kind of documentary on
get it pushed into the BBC where millions of normies will watch it. Like, that would be perfect Trojan horse. So any plebs listening, that's the ask. How do we get Graham in touch with Adam Curtis? That's what we need the network to step up and help us with. I think that would be such a incredible value add if we can get you guys talking, get him watching the film, get him excited about this subject and understanding, you know, the deep impact that both you and I see. Like, this isn't about hodling and, you know, increasing our purchasing power, then using it as collateral to enter into the fiat market. Like, no, we're here for different reasons. And that reason is what you've seen, an increase in everybody's purchasing power, in everybody's happiness, in everybody's health, and what happened down at Bitcoin Beach, and, you know, multiplying that by thousands, if not millions.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And, you know, I would just add, I'm not allowed more than one person, but I'm going to add one more as well, because another good documentary filmmaker is Oliver Stone, right? And I think he would be the other one that would be great if he could be orange pilled and do something in the Bitcoin world.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, I want to give a shout out as well to Pierre Corbin, who put us together and is organizing with Tomek as well the film festival, which the first run was last year in Warsaw, I believe, in Poland. And they're going to be doing that again in April. So are you going to be going there? Are you going to be walking the red carpet, getting the Satoshi Oscars?
Well, I certainly hope so. I don't know about the Satoshi Oscars, but it's a nice idea.
Is it an orange carpet? Please tell me it's an orange carpet.
Yeah, right. It has to be an orange carpet. And yeah, no, I would definitely try and make it. They're doing something at Lugano, the
Mm-hmm.
conference in Lugano. Well, they've got a whole film festival idea is really, gathering momentum. And you're right, good shout out to Pierre for putting us in touch. But they're doing something in the Lugano, which is another, they're trying to build their own little circular economy there. Bitcoin, putting Lugano on a Bitcoin standard, as I'm sure you know. And so I've got I'm doing a short thing for them, short little presentation with a trailer. They don't have time to screen the whole film because they've got limited time, but I'll be putting something together for that. And then I'm going to see whether, because actually the film is screened at are you going to adopting Bitcoin by any chance in El Salvador?
No, we don't have plans. That's middle of November, is that correct?
Yeah, well, early November, yeah, about the 7th.
Right, okay. No plans. Oh yeah, I'd love to. We just we're actually in Lugano, and then we're hanging around Como for a little while, and then we're going up to Stuttgart for the week-long Bitcoin events thing, and we're going to be doing live podcasts at the Princess Hotel. So yeah, that kind of overlaps a little bit with adopting Bitcoin, so we're not going to be able to make it. But like I told you in our text, after watching the film, the documentary, sorry, Lauren, my wife just turned around and said to me, "We have to go to El Salvador." I'm like, "Yes, thank you, Graham." So it's much more on the cards now, and so who knows? Maybe there's a late winter trip or even Christmas time. Who knows? I'll be keeping a keen eye on the flights.
Yeah, you got to go because it's I'm sure you've heard it many times. There's a special thing going on there, and it's not just the Bitcoin thing. It's just the energy there, the optimism, the hope, it's really quite unlike anything I've ever experienced. And and I guess it's because of that backdrop, which is why we had that at the beginning of the film.
Mm-hmm.
All the stuff, all the nightmare that country has been through over many decades, the suffering, the wars, the rule by gangs, everything that and so to out of the flames, this kind of phoenix has emerged, and it's
such a great story, and I'm looking forward to seeing Mike and Chimbera in Lugano because I know they're going, and I met them last year in Biarritz at the conference there, and actually I just checked the back catalog because I had Mike Peterson on from Bitcoin Beach, and I couldn't remember what date, and I've just double checked it. It's episode 103. If anyone's interested in going to look at that, listen to it. It's not on YouTube, but that was January 2021, so before the Bukele announcement. So this is interesting, I would say, to go back and listen to that and listen to Mike and what they're trying to achieve before the news drops, because none of that was on the cards in January 2021. Nobody knew this was coming, and he was still at the point of just telling the story about the anonymous donor and what they're trying to do and how they're trying to build it and reach the locals. And they had I think they had the Bitcoin Beach wallet going at that time. I'm pretty sure they did. And how he'd connected, but nobody knew really who Chimbera was or Jorge, right? Or even Mike. He was just literally hitting the podcast scene. And the reason I knew about those guys, I reached out because I'd offhandedly heard a comment from Matt Odell on a Rabbit Hole recap. Him and Marty were banging on about something, and they were talking about adoption. And I think he said, "Yeah, well, just look what's happening down at Bitcoin Beach with Mike." I'm like, what did he just say? Like, where is this? So I Googled Bitcoin Beach and come up with with that. Right, okay. And I found them on Twitter and reached out and set up the interview.
Wow.
So it's a great interview. And then to see the guys in Biarritz on stage on a panel was really special because they had a little video update of what's been going on. And this was August 2022. So they had almost a year of the big announcement and the changes. And obviously you guys had obviously been and started filming, right, at that point, which none of us knew about either. And as Chimbera is talking about the difference it's making to the locals and stuff, Mike's sitting on the panel just like streaming tears. And that was so powerful for my wife and kids to see as well, because we were all there watching. And just the difference it's making on the ground there to people, which you do convey very, very well in the film as well, is so heartwarming and uplifting and gives everybody such hope. And that's what hooked my wife into wanting to go and see for her own like self, how is Bitcoin changing people? And has he been talking complete nonsense at a dinner table all these years, or is there something to this, you know?
Well, exactly. Well, that's amazing that that you had already interviewed them back in January 21. So was that, I mean, because the first podcast I was aware of that they'd done was with Pete, McCormack. Were you even before him then? Or?
I really don't know. Don't know. Yeah.
But anyway, that was a long that was very early on. Before that was really when they were just getting going, I guess. Well, I guess they've been, they were right in the middle of getting their little circular economy going at that stage.
Yeah, incredible story. Really great story. All right, man. Well, let's start wrapping it up. Is there anywhere that you'd like to send the plebs to come and find you, or any further ask other than to contact you with Oliver Stone and Adam Curtis? Is there anything else that the guys can do that are listening?
Yeah, well, I'll definitely direct them to two places. One is the Twitter handle. So unfortunately, one thing that happened was I'd been building the kind of Twitter account for the film over the whole 2-year journey. And then just a couple of weeks ago, just after the film came out, I got locked out of the account. It was tied to a phone number in a different country where I was living before, and I didn't even think about it. I moved country, didn't have the phone number, didn't have access to that phone number anymore, and they couldn't verify me, so they locked me out, and I lost. It's still, I think it's still live, the account, but that was really frustrating. So I had to start again. So any supporters, any followers, really welcome. And so that is at Bitcoin_films. It's the handle. It's called, the name of the profile is Dare to Dream, but the handle is at Bitcoin_films. And the other thing would be the website, because the website has all the information about where it can be watched, because it depends on where you are in the world. It's worth knowing as well that those outside of the countries that have the exclusive distribution rights, which is US, Canada, and Caribbean. So outside of those countries, you can basically download the film with SATs through the website as well. That was really important that we had that available. So yeah, the film website is daretodream-film.com.
Excellent.
All the information's on there.
All right, mate. Well, thanks for your work. Thanks for coming on. Looking forward to meeting you at some stage in person. That'd be great. And hopefully I'll be with the whole family and you can talk us through some of those behind the scenes moments where everything was going wrong, and some bloopers and things like that. Everybody loves those.
Exactly. No, well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's been a blast, and hopefully we'll get to meet in person at some point.
All right. Have a great day, Graham. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Cheers. Bye.